Welcome back to Country Cow Designs. I'm Jo, and in this short video I'm just going to chat about the most common question that we get asked: what needles and threads do we use for sewing bags? So we get asked this question all the time, and as many of you will know, I use a Bernina 930 Record, which is a domestic sewing machine, but Adam uses an industrial sewing machine. So I'm just going to talk about threads and needles for the domestic, but I will say this. The threads and the needles used for industrials are different. So if you've ever wondered about, getting an industrial as well, they use different needles. They're designed differently, so they don't have that flat back that the domestic ones do. And they tend to use much thicker threads, so they tend to use bonded nylon ones. Adam uses Tex 70, Tex 90, and he's going to try Tex 135 soon. So quite big threads compared to a domestic machine. But we're just going to talk about what I use on my domestic machine for making bags. So the most common thread that I use for my machine is a Coats Moon threads. This is very similar to Gutermann's threads, and it's a 100% polyester thread. So for me, I find it stronger than cotton. You can still break it with a bit of ease, but it is stronger than cotton. You can get this in so many different colours, and it's very, very cheap. I haven't found it any different to the Gutermann's, except that it creates a little bit more fluff, so I have to remember to clean out my machine regularly. However, my favourite thread, but considerably more expensive, is this. It's called A-Man thread, A-M-A-N-N. This is a Tex 40 thread, so it's thicker. It's a fair bit thicker than that, and therefore it's a lot harder to break. So it's a lot stronger for bags. It's also nicer on top stitching because it's slightly thicker, so you kind of get like a more, detailed stitch. It's more visible. This is the maximum thickness that my machine can handle in the bobbin. So I can use this on top and I can use it on my bobbin. Whereas if I'm using like a Gutermann top stitch thread, it's so thick my bobbin cannot handle it. Now, I'm not going to guarantee that every domestic machine can handle this in the bobbin, but mine handles it just fine. I do generally have to, play with my tension a little bit when I'm switching between threads because of the different thicknesses. So that's just something to be aware of. In Britain, I get this from Little Stitcher Sews. I'm sure that there are other places in Europe and abroad that stock it. So yeah, just worth having a look. But Little Stitcher Sews is where I get it from in Britain. Now, for my needles. Many people say that they just stick a 90 needle in, a size 90, and just use it for everything. I do not do that. When I was given this machine by my grandmother, the one thing she said to me was, change your needles regularly and always use the right needle. It's good for your machine. So I always change my needles. When I'm using like a cotton for the inside of my bag, I'm using a size 70 needle, which is a 10. Sorry, I'm going to have to mention both sizes because there's two different measurements. So I'll use a 70-10 universal needle for like linings. Then maybe I'll go up to an 80-12 if it's getting thicker. When it gets really thick, so when you're at the end and you are going through the binding, so for instance on this bag, you're going through like all these different layers, that is when I change up to a size 100, which is a 16, or even a 110, which is a size 18. It really depends how many layers I've got going on, but if there's loads and loads of layers, I will give my machine a big needle, because otherwise my machine is working so hard to like punch that needle through the fabric, and I just want to give it as much help as I can. Bear in mind as well that you want to change your needles regularly because they'll go blunt, and then again, if you're using a domestic machine for bags, you want to give your machine all the assistance that you can, and having a sharp needle will mean that it's not having to punch through quite so hard. It'll just take the pressure off. So these little things do make a difference. Now, different types of needles. Universal is what I use for the bulk of things. But if I'm using cork, wax canvas or faux leather, I go to my trusty Microtex needles. Microtex needles, they have a different type of point to them. They're much sharper, they're better for densely woven fabrics. They also have like a special coating on them. It took me a while to realise this, but when I use them with double-sided tape, when I'm like sewing through double-sided tape, I don't get any residue on my needle. If I sew through the same tape with a universal needle, it comes up with all that gunk on it, you know, and then it's causing problems for, you know, everything. It's pulling it up into my machine. It's meaning that my stitches start skipping. So when I'm using double-sided tape, I go for Microtex needles or super universal needles, which is something Schmetz do. I don't know if other needle manufacturers do it. Super universal needles have like a special anti-stick coating. They're brilliant, but they're expensive. Bear in mind with Microtex needles that they have a finer point, so it does recommend that you change them more regularly because they're more likely to break after you've been using them for a while. If I'm using something like denim or similar sort of fabric, I will use jeans needles. I do have up to a size 120, which is a size 20 needle, which is huge, and I've only used it very, very occasionally, but I do have it. If you're doing leather, real leather, it's different to everything else, and you need to have leather needles. So leather needles have a totally different tip, and it will make a difference to your sewing. If you're getting like skip stitches, or your stitching just looks really messy, and you know you've adjusted your tension and everything, check your needle, because if you're using the wrong size, the wrong type, if it's an old needle, it will mess up your stitching, you know, and your top stitching won't be perfect. So if you're going to change a needle, a great time to swap to a new needle is when you're doing the top stitching on a bag, because then you're going to get the best possible results. So I change generally between a size 70, which is a 10, and a 110, which is an 18. As a contrast, for Adam's industrial machine, he generally tends to go with needles that are a size 100, which is a 16, up to a 120, which is a 20. So he uses much bigger needles than I do, but he needs to because he's using bigger threads, and the bigger the thread, the bigger the needle needs to be. And he also has different types of needles. So he'll have like a denim needle, a universal needle, and a leather needle. So it's a similar sort of setup in that sense. If you're really struggling with a bag and your needles keep breaking, just try swapping to a different manufacturer, because I have had instances in the past where I've broken like 5 needles in a row. I've then changed to a different brand and not broken a single needle. So I'm not sure whether it's the needle not agreeing with the fabric or with my machine or what the problem is. But I tend to find Schmetz is my absolute favourite. Love Schmetz. Hemline, I don't have any problems with them either. And sometimes I use these class ones. Not as often, just because they're not as readily available. But if you are struggling with your needles, just maybe try a different brand and see if that makes a difference for you. So that's the tips that me and Adam have picked up whilst we've been sewing bags, mostly from trial and error, but also just things that we've picked up from various places online and Facebook groups and things like that. If you have any other tips, please share them in the comments. We always love to hear what you guys have to say, and we love to try new things. If you've got any questions, go ahead and ask. And if you have any bag making tip videos that you want us to do, just let us know, because we're always looking for new little videos, just anything that we can do to maybe help out, answer your questions, and share your ideas, because a lot of the ideas and the tips that we've got, they've come from you guys. So thank you so much for that. We hope you enjoyed this video, and we'll see you soon. Bye.